Welcome to my channel. Tonight, let me take you into a place where the world doesn't move with time, where the air is heavy with whispers, and love feels like something older than the stars themselves. The night begins softly, with the sound of wind moving through ancient trees and a single figure walking through a forest that has kept its secrets for centuries. The moonlight spills gently over the river like silver threads, and there, by the edge of the water, she sees him for the first time. His figure stands half in shadow, half bathed in the glow of the night, and there's something about the way he looks at her. Not like a stranger, not like someone who stumbled upon her by chance, but like someone who has waited for her across lifetimes. It isn't loud. It isn't forced. It's a quiet recognition, like two souls finally breathing the same air after years apart. She doesn't know why her heart moves before her feet do, but she steps closer, and with each step, the world seems to fall away. The forest grows still, as if it's watching, holding its breath. When their eyes meet, the air shifts. His gaze is steady, dark as the night river, and though no words are spoken, something passes between them, something that makes her chest ache and her pulse stutter. She has spent her life believing in silence, in things that stay hidden, but tonight, everything begins to unravel with the warmth of a stranger's stare. The moment is fragile, but it hums with danger too, because the forest is not empty. Shadows stir among the trees, tall shapes with eyes that reflect the moon like polished glass. He reaches out, not to claim her but to anchor her. His hand is warm against her cold fingers, and the simple touch feels like stepping into fire after a long winter. "Don't be afraid," he whispers, but his voice carries something else beneath it. Something that warns her that this night is not like any other. And then she hears it too, low and deep, a hum that rises from the ground itself. The wind shifts, the river quivers, and slowly, figures emerge from the mist. They are women, taller than any human she has ever seen, their hair cascading like black rivers, their skin glowing faintly as though carved from starlight. They are breathtaking and terrifying all at once. Their eyes hold centuries, and their presence bends the air around them. She doesn't need him to tell her who they are. She already knows. The tribe. The guardians. The warnings whispered in stories meant to scare children. The ones you're never supposed to meet. He squeezes her hand gently, and she feels his pulse racing as fast as hers. He has brought her here not by accident, but because the night had always been leading her to this moment. The leader of the women steps forward, her voice not spoken but felt in the bones. "You have walked where few are allowed," the voice echoes softly through the clearing. "You stand before the first daughters. And no one stands before us without a choice." Her throat goes dry, her heart beating so loud she swears the river can hear it. She wants to step back, but the heat of his hand keeps her grounded, as if he's silently telling her that turning away isn't an option anymore. The wind grows colder. The guardian women circle slowly, like shadows spinning around the moon. Their presence isn't violent, it's solemn, like a ceremony written in the air long before she ever existed. "Kneel," the voice whispers again, "or face the end." The words are not a threat. They are a promise. She looks up at him, at the boy who feels like both her beginning and her undoing. His face is calm, but his eyes betray a storm. "This is why I found you," he whispers, his voice almost breaking. "They chose you before I ever could." She feels something crack inside her. Fear, wonder, disbelief, love, all tangled into a single shiver that runs down her spine. "Why me?" she whispers. "Because only you can decide," he breathes. "Only your heart can open what they've kept locked away." The tallest of the guardian women steps closer, her shadow falling across them both like a cloak. She reaches out, a hand long and luminous, and for a heartbeat, everything stops. The forest, the wind, even time itself. In that stillness, the girl feels the pull, not of magic, but of something older than magic. It is the pull of destiny, the weight of a story that has always been waiting for her. She closes her eyes and steps forward, her hand slipping into the guardian's light. A warmth spreads through her chest, fierce and soft all at once, and the forest erupts in light. The tribe bows their heads, not in surrender but in acknowledgement. She has chosen. She has become part of something she can't fully understand yet. The boy's arms are around her before she realizes she's falling. His heartbeat pounds against her ear, steady and real. The guardians begin to fade back into the mist, their presence softening like the end of a song. But before they disappear, the leader's voice echoes through the night one last time. Do not run from what has chosen you. It will find you again. And then they are gone, leaving only the sound of the river and the scent of rain clinging to the wind. She pulls back to look at him, breathless, trembling, every piece of her life before this moment feeling small and distant. What happens now? She whispers. He cups her face gently, his eyes softening with something that feels like both a confession and a promise. Now, he says, we walk together into what they feared the most. A love that isn't bound by their rules. The forest exhales with them, and she feels it deep in her bones. The truth that nothing will ever be the same. She has been seen. She has been chosen. And she has chosen back. As they stand together beneath the silent trees, wrapped in moonlight and secrets, their foreheads touch, and everything else falls away. The tribe's warning still lingers in the air like smoke, but love has already carved its place in the darkness, fierce and fragile. If you enjoyed this journey into love and mystery, consider subscribing for more enchanting tales. Your support means the world to me, and together, we can keep exploring the places where love and destiny meet. The forest grew quieter as the night settled in, the wind shifting into a soft hum that pressed against her skin like a whispered secret. She could still feel the weight of the guardian's presence lingering in the air even after they faded into the mist. It wasn't the kind of silence that brought peace. It was the kind that wrapped around your soul, the kind that made every heartbeat sound louder, heavier, like it belonged to a story older than your own. She didn't move. She couldn't. Her feet were rooted in the damp earth, her breath tangled in the cold air. He stood just behind her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his chest against her back, steady and grounding, like an anchor tied to something unshakable. His voice broke the silence, low and rough like a secret being peeled open. They've been waiting for this night, he said. For you. She turned slowly, her eyes catching the faint moonlight, and the way he looked at her made her chest tighten. He wasn't looking at her like someone who stumbled into this by chance. He was looking at her like someone who had known this moment was coming long before she ever did. She felt both pulled toward him and terrified of what his eyes seemed to hold. You talk like I was meant to be here, she whispered, barely trusting her own voice. You were, he replied simply, and there was no hesitation in his tone, no trace of doubt. The river rippled softly beside them as if it too was listening. A few pale petals drifted past on the current, glowing faintly under the moonlight like whispers carried by the water. She wanted to ask how he knew, how any of this could possibly be real, but the questions tangled in her throat like vines. You don't understand, she said, trying to step back, but his hand caught hers, not tightly, just enough to keep her from drifting away. His fingers were warm against her cold skin, the heat of his touch pulling her back into the moment she didn't know how to face. I don't have to understand, he said softly. I only have to help you remember. Something in the way he said it made the night feel even heavier. The wind curled around them like it had shape and weight. Her heart started to pound harder, a rhythm she could feel not just in her chest but in her fingertips, in her throat, in the air itself. Remember what? She asked, though some small part of her feared the answer. He stepped closer, his face close enough for her to see the faint shimmer of the moon in his dark eyes. Who you are, he whispered. What the forest has been waiting for. She wanted to laugh, to shake her head, to run. She wanted to tell him she was no one, that this was just some twisted dream that would fade with the morning light. But then, before she could speak, the ground beneath their feet trembled, not with violence but with a slow, deliberate pulse. The trees swayed though there was no wind. The air grew warmer, and the faint hum of something old and alive rose from the river like a distant chorus. The night was listening, and whatever waited in the shadows was answering a call she didn't remember making. He let go of her hand just long enough to step in front of her. The edges of his coat brushed against her knees as he moved, and when he turned, his face wasn't calm anymore. It was serious, shadowed, like a man standing on the edge of something he could never return from. "The tribe does not warn twice," he murmured. "You saw them tonight. That means the veil is breaking. They will come again, and next time, they will not come just to watch." A shiver ran down her spine. She wanted to deny it. She wanted to say he was wrong. But her heart was pounding too hard to lie to herself. She had felt it, the power in the way the tribe had looked at her, the weight in their voices, the cold beauty of their towering forms. They didn't come for nothing. They came for her. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to hold in the storm building inside her. "Why me?" she asked, but it came out as a tremor, not a demand. He didn't answer right away. He stepped closer until their faces were only a breath apart, the mist between them swirling like smoke. His gaze softened, but his voice stayed firm. "Because you are the last name," they whispered before they went silent. The world tilted a little then. It wasn't the kind of tilt that threw her off balance. It was the kind that made her realize she'd never actually stood on solid ground to begin with. "I don't know what that means," she whispered. "You will," he said gently. "They will make sure you do." His hand found hers again, warmer this time, steady in the growing chill of the night. "But you won't face it alone." His words shouldn't have comforted her. They should have scared her even more. But there was something about the way he said them, like he was building a bridge between her fear and something she couldn't yet name. For the first time since she saw the Guardians, she let her hand stay in his. The river hummed louder, and the air shifted again, this time softer, as if the night itself approved of her decision. The moon hung lower, glowing brighter, wrapping them both in a fragile halo of light. Somewhere in the forest, a low sound echoed, not quite human, not quite beast. A reminder. A warning. The tribe was still watching, even from the dark. She took a slow breath, feeling the heat of his fingers against her palm, and realized with a quiet ache that something inside her was already changing. Whether she wanted to or not, her story had already begun. The wind lifted her hair gently, brushing it against his cheek, and in the space between their heartbeats, everything stilled. He didn't kiss her. He didn't have to. The weight of what was coming sat between them, heavy and inevitable, and in that silence, she understood what he had been trying to tell her all along. This wasn't just a warning. This was a beginning. A dangerous, breathtaking, irreversible beginning. And the night, beautiful and cruel, wasn't going to let her turn back. The night unfolded around them like a living thing, the forest breathing with a rhythm that no longer felt like mere wind. The river carried the silver reflection of the moon, its quiet hum blending with the whisper of leaves swaying as if they, too, were aware of something awakening. The warmth of his hand still lingered against her palm, and even though the tribe had disappeared into the mist, their presence pulsed like a heartbeat beneath the ground. She stood on the edge of something vast and unknowable, feeling the weight of every breath she took as though the world was holding its breath with her. He stood only a step away, his dark silhouette wrapped in the moonlight, his gaze steady, watching her with an intensity that made her pulse flutter against her will. "I can still feel them," she whispered, glancing toward the tree line where the figures had vanished. "They are gone, but they are not." Her words came out unsteady, like someone testing the edges of a dream they hadn't quite woken from. He nodded slowly, his jaw tight, his breath clouding the air between them. "They never really leave," he said softly. "When the tribe chooses, they remain in the air, in the roots, in the river. They become the night itself." His words weren't meant to scare her, yet they did, not because of their weight but because deep down, she could feel he was telling the truth. Her heart pounded against her ribs, and she wrapped her arms around herself as though she could hold everything inside, keep the fear from spilling out. "Why me?" she breathed, her voice trembling despite her efforts to sound strong. "Why do they want me?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped closer, the sound of his boots brushing against the soft ground. The distance between them shrank until she could feel the heat radiating from his body, and when he spoke again, his voice was low, carrying both gentleness and warning. "Because your name was carved into their history long before you ever took your first breath," he said. "You are the echo of a promise that hasn't been fulfilled." She stared at him, searching his face for even a trace of uncertainty. Something that might tell her this was a story he was inventing, something unreal. But there was nothing. His eyes held the weight of centuries. His voice carried no doubt. She shook her head, stumbling back a step as her chest tightened. "That's impossible," she whispered. "I've never even heard of them until tonight." The wind picked up then, brushing cold fingers through her hair as if the night itself wanted to remind her that ignorance doesn't erase destiny. He followed her, not rushing, just enough to keep her from retreating into the darkness alone. "You weren't supposed to," he said quietly. "The tribe only reveals itself to the heart it claims. No one else. This isn't something you can hide from or run away from. It's not a choice they made tonight. It's a choice they made long ago." She clenched her fists, her breath shaking. "But I didn't choose any of this," she said sharply. "I didn't ask to be part of their story." For a heartbeat, silence filled the clearing again, heavy and absolute. He reached out, his fingers brushing her cheek in a touch so soft it almost felt like it wasn't real. "No," he murmured. "But sometimes, stories choose us before we ever learn how to speak." Her breath hitched, and she turned her head away, but not fast enough to hide the tremor that ran through her body. The feeling of the tribe's presence grew stronger, not closer but deeper, inside the earth beneath her feet, in the soft rush of the river, in the trees bending slightly as if bowing. She felt it not just in the world around her but beneath her skin, a whisper threading itself through her veins. She pressed a hand to her chest, startled by how warm it felt, as though something was blooming beneath her ribs. "Something's happening," she whispered. "I can feel them." His eyes softened, but the shadows in them didn't disappear. "It's the bond," he said quietly. "They've already begun to claim you. Once they touch your soul, they never let go." She looked at him, fear and wonder twisting inside her chest. "And what about you?" she asked, voice breaking slightly. "What are you in all this?" He took a slow step closer, so close now she could feel the brush of his breath against her skin. "I am their bridge," he said. "The one who walks between their world and yours. The one who finds the chosen heart when the time comes." Her pulse skipped, the warmth in her chest growing heavier, brighter, as if some invisible thread had tied itself to him. "So you knew this would happen," she whispered. "From the moment you found me." His silence was the answer she feared most. His eyes said everything his lips didn't. She felt the ground shift beneath her feet, not physically, but in the way the world tilts when you realize nothing is the same anymore. She wanted to be angry, but the way he looked at her, like someone who'd been carrying this weight alone for far too long, made the anger melt into something far more dangerous, understanding. "You could have left me alone," she said quietly. "You could have let me stay in the life I knew." He shook his head slowly. "No," he said, almost brokenly. "I couldn't. Because even before tonight, I was already bound to you." The forest grew warmer, the mist swirling around them as if pulled by the invisible thread connecting them. The river hummed louder, wrapping them in its song. And though no guardian was in sight, she felt their unseen eyes watching, listening, waiting. "You're not free, are you?" she whispered. He closed the final distance between them, his forehead brushing lightly against hers. "Not since the day they whispered your name," he breathed. "And now neither are you." The world narrowed to that single touch, the warmth of his skin, the weight of his words, the pulse of the forest around them. She didn't pull away. She couldn't. Something in her bones understood what her mind couldn't yet. This was not an ordinary night. This was a turning point, quiet but irreversible. And as the wind curled around them, she felt it. The story shifting, tightening, drawing her in. She was no longer standing at the edge of it. She was inside it now, and there was no way out. Somewhere deep in the forest, a distant, haunting sound rose, a low, melodic hum that carried the unmistakable presence of the tribe. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. He didn't have to tell her what it meant. She already knew. This was only the beginning. The forest held its breath as the sound of the tribe's distant hum slowly sank into the night, threading itself through the river, the trees, and her heartbeat. It didn't feel like an echo anymore. It felt like something alive, something that had decided she belonged to it, whether she understood why or not. The air around her had grown warmer and heavier, like the night itself had wrapped its hands around her and refused to let go. The ground beneath her bare feet pulsed softly, not like the earth she had always known but like something breathing beneath the surface. She felt it in her chest, in the spaces between her fingers, in the quickening rhythm of her pulse. The tribe was no longer just a story whispered by the fire or a warning carved into the oldest stones. It was here. It was real. And it was inside her now. He stood a few steps away, his face half lost in the silver glow of the moon, half swallowed by the shadows. His eyes stayed fixed on her, unwavering, as if he could see something she couldn't. It wasn't the look of someone who had just found her. It was the look of someone who had known her all along, the look of someone watching fate unfold exactly the way it was meant to. She wanted to hate him for it, for the way he had led her here with steady hands and quiet eyes. But there was something in the way he looked at her that kept her anchored. There was fear there, buried deep beneath the calm. A fear of losing something before it even had a chance to begin. "I don't understand," she whispered, her voice catching on the weight of the air. "Why me? Why is it me?" Her question wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The night seemed to bend around her words, carrying them upward into the trees, where the shadows listened. He stepped closer, slow and deliberate, his boots sinking into the soft ground. "Because the tribe doesn't choose at random," he said softly. "They choose the one whose soul carries their echo. You are not here by accident." She shook her head, backing away a step, the river's soft current brushing against the edge of her feet like cold fingers. "I don't have anything they could want," she whispered. "I'm no one. I've spent my life trying to disappear." He stopped in front of her, just close enough that she could feel his warmth against the cold air, his voice breaking into the silence like the first crack in stone. "That's exactly why," he said. "They don't choose power. They choose the one who carries silence well enough to awaken theirs." For a long moment, neither of them moved. The wind curled around them, playing with the strands of her hair, brushing it across his cheek. She hadn't noticed how close they had become until she could hear the faint rhythm of his breathing, steady and slow, like he was holding the world together by breathing alone. She felt the weight of what he said settle inside her like a quiet storm, and when she met his gaze, she saw it. The way he was holding something back, a truth too heavy to hand to her all at once. "You've known this for a long time, haven't you?" she whispered. His lips parted, and for a heartbeat, he didn't speak. Then he nodded. "Since the night they whispered your name," he admitted. Her chest tightened. "You could have told me," she said. "You could have given me a choice before tonight." He flinched, not in fear, but in guilt. "I wanted to," he whispered. "But the tribe doesn't allow the chosen to be warned. They must feel the calling, or it doesn't hold. If I had told you, you might have turned away. And if you had, the world would have ended before you ever knew why." His words fell heavy between them, heavier than the silence that followed. She turned her head toward the river, her reflection trembling against the water, fractured and unrecognizable. She didn't look like the girl who had walked into the forest hours ago. She didn't feel like her either. She felt like someone else entirely, like a story that had already been written was moving beneath her skin. "I'm scared," she admitted quietly. The moment she said it, the sound of the tribe shifted. It wasn't louder, but it grew closer, like the forest was pulling them toward it, like the night itself wanted to cradle her fear in its hands. He stepped even closer, lifting a hand slowly, carefully, like someone who knew the fragility of the moment. His fingers brushed against her cheek, warm against the cool night, and the world around her narrowed to the point where only his touch existed. "I know," he whispered. "I've been scared, too. Every night since they sent me to find you." Her breath caught. "They sent you?" He nodded slowly. "I was born for this," he said, his voice quiet but steady. "To find the one who would stand at the edge of the tribe's warning. To lead her here. To watch her choose." She wanted to pull away from him, to escape the trap of destiny curling around them like smoke. But when she looked at him, really looked at him, she saw something unexpected. He wasn't their weapon. He wasn't their servant. He was just a man caught in the same story as her, bound to something he didn't choose but could never escape. And beneath the duty in his eyes, there was something else, something that stole her breath without asking. It was the way he looked at her, not as the chosen, not as the tribe's voice, but as the girl standing in front of him. "They chose me," she whispered. "But you chose to follow." His hand slid down from her cheek to her jaw, holding her as if she might disappear into the mist if he let go. "Yes," he whispered. "And I'd choose it again." The wind swirled between them, the river's surface rippling with a soft glow. Somewhere in the forest, the tribe's hum rose and fell like the tide, as if marking the moment when two paths became one. The fear in her chest didn't disappear, but it changed shape, curling into something else, something warm and aching and unbearably alive. She didn't know what was waiting beyond this night. She didn't know what the tribe would demand of her. But in that fragile breath between the cold and the warmth of his hands, she knew this moment was hers. The night leaned closer then, heavy with its secrets. The mist around the trees thickened, and for a heartbeat, she thought she saw their glowing eyes again, watching silently, waiting for the story to keep moving. She didn't run this time. She didn't break. She simply let herself feel the way his touch steadied her, the way her heartbeat found its rhythm next to his. When she finally spoke, her voice didn't shake. "Then I'll face them," she whispered. His eyes softened, the corners of his mouth curving into something between pride and sorrow. "Then you're already stronger than you know." The forest exhaled, the tribe's song fading into the night like a secret whispered to the stars. But it wasn't gone. It lingered inside her chest, a steady pulse, waiting for the moment it would rise again. And when it did, she knew they would be standing side by side, not as strangers bound by fate, but as something far more dangerous, far more beautiful. The night did not sleep after her decision. It shifted. The river grew louder, like 1,000 whispers pressing against the shore, and the wind took on a rhythm, moving through the trees as if the forest itself now pulsed with the beat of her heart. The choice she made, silent but unshakable, had awakened something, not just in the ground beneath her feet but in the spaces between everything. The tribe's song, once distant and haunting, now hummed faintly inside her veins. She could feel them, even when they weren't visible, their presence brushing against her senses like a hand she couldn't quite touch. It wasn't fear anymore, not the kind that made her run. It was something else, something deeper. A tether, a claiming, a beginning she could no longer pretend didn't exist. He stood across from her, his chest rising and falling with quiet breaths, the moonlight resting gently on the sharp lines of his face. He looked different now, not because his features had changed, but because she could finally see him. The shadows clinging to him weren't just the forests, they were part of him. He carried the weight of the tribe too, the same way she did now. His eyes, dark and steady, burned with something soft and raw, something that didn't belong to the tribe's cold warnings but to him alone. She had been terrified of his calm before, but now she understood it wasn't calm at all. It was someone who had spent a lifetime walking in the space between worlds. "Everything's different now," she whispered, her voice barely reaching past her lips. It wasn't a question. It was a truth. He stepped forward slowly, closing the space between them, each step a promise wrapped in silence. "It was always going to be," he murmured, his voice low and warm, the kind that slipped beneath the skin. "The moment you saw them, there was no going back. But I swear to you, you won't face this alone." His words shouldn't have felt like a comfort, not with everything that had just happened. But somehow, they did. They slipped into the cracks of her fear and held them together just enough to keep her from breaking. She wanted to ask 1,000 questions, what it meant to be chosen, why the tribe had waited for her, what their warning truly held. But when she opened her mouth, the wind answered first. It wrapped around her like a soft, unseen hand, lifting strands of her hair and spinning them into the cold air. The forest felt awake, watching, waiting, and then it happened. From the darkness beyond the tree line, a faint glow appeared. It was soft at first, like the light of fireflies, then it grew stronger, swirling like mist woven with starlight. The Guardians had returned, not as figures towering over the forest but as drifting silhouettes, their presence brushing the edge of the clearing like a promise and a threat entwined. Her breath hitched, not from fear this time but from the weight of what she knew. They weren't here to test her anymore. They were here to claim what was already theirs. He reached for her hand without hesitation, their fingers fitting together as if they'd done this 100 times before. His thumb brushed gently against her skin, steadying her as the glowing figures came closer, their movements silent but graceful, like water flowing uphill. "Do not bow," he whispered against her ear, his voice rougher now. "They already know who you are." The leader of the Guardians stepped forward, taller than the rest, her form brighter, her eyes burning like molten silver. She did not speak with her mouth. Her voice filled the night, soft but commanding, sliding beneath the skin like smoke. "The heart has answered," she whispered, and the trees around them seemed to bend inward. "The world will shift." The others followed, their voices layering over hers like a chorus of echoes. What was asleep now wakes. What was waiting now claims. What was lost now stands. She felt the pull then, not a hand dragging her forward, but a force calling from deep inside her, like she was part of this forest, this tribe, this night. Her knees trembled, but she didn't fall. His grip on her tightened, and when she turned her head, she saw something in his expression that made the air catch in her lungs. It wasn't fear. It wasn't duty. It was devotion. "You're ready," he whispered. "Even if you don't believe it yet." The leader's hand rose, fingers long and shimmering with light. She didn't touch her, not physically. She didn't have to. The moment the light reached her chest, warmth exploded beneath her skin, spreading like fire laced with stars. She gasped, clutching his hand tighter, but she didn't pull away. The warmth grew brighter, flooding through her veins, reaching every corner of her body. It didn't burn. It didn't hurt. It remade her. The song of the tribe grew louder, no longer haunting but full, alive, unstoppable. The river responded, glowing brighter, its current racing as if it too had been waiting for this. The wind spun around them in a slow, endless spiral, carrying fragments of the song through the night. She could feel their power inside her now, not as a chain but as a heartbeat echoing her own. She wasn't just standing in their world anymore. She was part of it. Her knees finally gave out, not from pain but from the weight of it all, and he caught her before she hit the ground. His arms wrapped around her, holding her steady, his heartbeat pounding against her ear like a drum she could trust. The Guardians stood around them, their light dimming but their presence lingering like a crown laid upon her head. The leader lowered her hand, and for the first time, there was something like softness in her glowing eyes. "It begins," the voice whispered through the trees. "The chosen does not kneel. The chosen stands." The light faded slowly, drifting back toward the forest, melting into the darkness as if it had never been there. The hum softened again, the night breathing out a long, heavy sigh. He still held her, his forehead resting gently against hers, the heat of his skin grounding her against the storm inside. She was shaking, not from fear anymore but from the enormity of what she had become. "I don't even know what I am anymore," she whispered. His thumb brushed against her jaw, slow and soft. "You're still you," he said. "But now the world will finally see what it tried to ignore." The forest was silent again, but it wasn't the silence she had met at the beginning of the night. This one carried power, promise, danger, love, all of it tangled into something she could no longer untangle. Her story was no longer just hers. It was theirs. And in the dim silver of the moon, held against his chest, she knew one thing with frightening clarity. The tribe had given its warning to the world, and she was the answer to it. The night bled into dawn without ever truly letting go of its grip. The forest was quiet, but not the kind of quiet that came with peace. This silence thrummed with something living and watching, the soft vibration of an ancient song that now existed inside her bones. The air carried the scent of river water and earth, sharp and cool, and the mist had wrapped itself around the trees like smoke refusing to leave the battlefield after a war. She stood on unsteady feet, still feeling the weight of the tribe's touch, Their light burned into her skin like a mark that wasn't visible but could be felt. The river shimmered faintly under the pale sky, reflecting not just the rising sun but the echo of everything that had happened. The night had changed her. There was no mistaking it. He was still there, leaning against the trunk of a broad, ancient tree, the kind whose roots seemed to remember every secret ever whispered in this place. He didn't say a word, and he didn't have to. She could feel his presence even with her eyes closed, warm and solid against the trembling rhythm in her chest. It wasn't the presence of someone who saved her. It was the presence of someone who stood beside her. She turned slowly toward him, the faint breeze catching strands of her hair, lifting them like silk ribbons in the wind. He watched her quietly, his dark eyes carrying both the ache of someone who had waited too long and the relief of someone who finally didn't have to carry everything alone. "They are gone," she whispered, her voice hoarse from everything the night had taken out of her. "But I can still feel them." He nodded once, slowly. "They'll never really be gone," he said. "Once the tribe marks you, their voice becomes part of your heartbeat. It doesn't fade. It just finds its place inside you." She let out a shaky breath, the truth sinking in like water filling the cracks of stone. She had known before, somewhere in the quiet corners of her mind, that this was permanent. But hearing it out loud made it real in a way nothing else could. "I didn't ask for this," she murmured, staring down at the water's reflection, the image of her face shifting with every ripple. She didn't look like the girl who had walked into this forest hours ago. That girl had been soft and silent, content to disappear into the edges of her own life. The woman staring back at her now had fire stitched beneath her skin. He pushed away from the tree and crossed the space between them in slow, measured steps, like someone approaching something fragile. "I know," he said softly. "Neither did I." The confession slid between them like a knife wrapped in silk. She blinked up at him, her heart tripping over the edges of itself. He wasn't a soldier of the tribe. He wasn't their perfect servant. He was just as bound as she was. "You didn't choose this?" she asked quietly. He shook his head, the corner of his mouth tightening, not in anger, but in something heavier. "They found me when I was a boy," he said, his voice low, almost a growl. "I thought they were beautiful. I didn't know beauty can chain you, too. By the time I understood what they'd done, it was already too late. They gave me a purpose I didn't ask for. I became their bridge, the shadow between their world and yours. I spent years searching for you, not because I wanted to, but because I had to." The weight of his words sank into her chest, heavy and alive. She stepped closer to him without realizing she'd moved, the ground damp beneath her bare feet. The tribe's echo hummed softly in her blood, but now she could feel something else beneath it. The way his heartbeat seemed to match hers, steadying it. "And now," she asked, "now that they've found me, what happens to you?" He looked at her for a long moment before answering, his expression unreadable but not cold. "Now I'm no longer their bridge," he said quietly. "Now I'm bound to you." The words struck her like lightning, silent but bright enough to set her insides alight. She didn't know if she should fear it or hold it close. She could feel the weight of the bond between them now, subtle but strong, like a thread of silver tied around their hearts. Not forced, not cold, just there. She thought of all the warnings in the tribe's voices, of their glowing eyes, of the way the air itself bent when they spoke. They had chosen her, but he had chosen to stay. That truth wrapped around her like a soft storm. The first rays of dawn broke through the trees, warm gold bleeding into the fading silver of the night. She turned her face toward the light, breathing it in like someone tasting air for the first time. But even the sunrise didn't push away the shadows completely. The tribe was still out there. Their warning wasn't a story meant for her alone. It was meant for the world. Kneel before the giant women or face the end. The words rolled through her memory, heavy and sharp. They were waiting for something. And now, she was at the center of it. She looked back at him, and for the first time since this began, she didn't just see the bridge between two worlds. She saw the man beneath it. He was tired, but there was a quiet strength in the way he stood, as if he'd long accepted the weight of what they both carried. But more than that, She saw the way his gaze lingered on her, like the world had tilted just slightly when the tribe named her. She felt the same shift inside herself, terrifying and warm all at once. "What if I can't do what they expect?" she whispered. He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his breath brushing against her cheek. His voice was low, almost a vow. "Then we'll rewrite the story." Her chest tightened, her throat burning with the kind of feeling that had no name. It wasn't just fear anymore. It wasn't just destiny pressing against her ribs. It was something that belonged to them alone, growing quietly between their shadows. She reached out without thinking, fingers brushing against his. His hand closed around hers instantly, like it had always belonged there. The forest didn't hum this time. It listened. They stood like that for a long time, neither of them moving, the sun slowly climbing higher, turning the mist into gold. She realized something then, something the tribe's warnings hadn't said. The choice hadn't ended when she accepted the bond. The choice was only beginning. She could carry their power like a weight, or she could wield it like a blade. And she wasn't alone anymore. He leaned in slowly, their foreheads touching, their breaths mixing in the space between. "This isn't the end," he whispered against her skin. "This is where everything starts." The wind rose, swirling around them, as if the forest itself agreed. The hum of the tribe sank into her heartbeat, no longer just a whisper in the dark but a part of her. She wasn't the girl she had been before she stepped into this clearing. She wasn't a frightened witness anymore. She was the storm that would decide how the warning ended. And as the dawn broke fully, wrapping them both in its warmth, the bond between them tightened, not like a chain, but like a promise. A promise written in the language of ancient guardians and soft, trembling human hearts. A promise strong enough to shake the world.